Hello and welcome to this short video, which is just a quick summary of the various aspects that I talked about in the workshop I gave on Boru's March at Quarantunes 10.0. Scarily, 30 plus years ago, this was one of the first pieces I ever learned to play on the harp, so it was quite nice to be able to present this piece at the festival. To begin with, I'd like to look at the right hand patterns because there is a lot of repetition in this tune, which makes it ideal for anyone who's not so familiar with placing four fingers at once, especially in the right hand. I think one of the critical things with this piece to make it work well is getting used to placing the four fingers in the right shape together. So if this is something that's new to you and you don't feel particularly confident with, spend some time now as you learn the patterns getting used to this idea of placing the four fingers together, because the cleaner it is, the easier it will be. So to begin with, place the four fingers on the right strings for the first pattern. Now if you find it difficult to get the four fingers on together, this is a useful technique for learning the pattern. Once the fingers are placed, just lightly squeeze the strings, relax the fingers again, squeeze and relax, do that a few times. Because what we're trying to do is to train the fingers to learn the shape. After you've done that a few times, just play the notes. Now shake your hand out, and without looking at the strings, just see if you can place the shape back. It doesn't matter one bit if it's a string higher, a string lower, or several strings higher or several strings lower. The important thing is to learn the shape. Once you're comfortable with that, then start tackling the different patterns. For this first pattern, which is going to make up the bulk of the A section of the tune, place 1, 2, 3 and 4 on E, C, B and A. We're then going to play a downward progression of notes, followed by a note on its own, which we'll play with the second finger. So out of rhythm, so once the fingers are placed, play 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're going to play the A again with the second finger. Then the next bit of this first segment is going to be the same shape or pattern down a string. So now we put the same fingers onto D, B, A and G, and we repeat the same thing. Once you're able to do that out of rhythm, then learn it in rhythm. So it'll sound like this when you play rhythmically. 4, 5. Once you're happy with that, then move on to the next pattern. And the next pattern is going to be the pattern that makes up the bulk of the C section, or the third section of the tune, which is really just built on this first pattern, just the ending changes slightly. So begin again by placing the four fingers on E, C, B and A. Now this time, out of rhythm, we'll play 1, 2 and 3. But before we play the fourth finger, we need to reach up with the thumb onto the A an octave higher, play the low A, fourth finger, then the high thumb. Then down a step for the same pattern. So 1, 2, 3, 4 on D, B, A and G this time. So again we're going to play 1, 2, 3, and then before we play the fourth finger, get the thumb up onto the high G. Once you're happy with playing it out of rhythm, this is what it should sound like in rhythm. 4, 5. Once you're feeling happy with that, move on to the next pattern. Now this pattern is going to be what makes up the last phrase of all three sections. On the handout I've given you two possible fingerings for the same passage. The first one, or the slightly higher one, is the one I would personally use. and that is to place 4, 3, 2, 1 on A, C, D and E to start off with, and we'll play the notes going up. We don't connect onwards, we do a fresh placing, and it'll be 1 on D, 2 on C, 3 on A. We then play them, and then finally 2 A's on their own with the second finger. So in rhythm it'll be 4, 5, 6. The other option is also worth practicing, and that is to play the second one. And the difference is this: we start off exactly the same way, so we play 4, 3, 2, and then before we play the E, we put 2, 3 and 4 back on the same strings, then we play the thumb and then carry on back down, and then the last 2 notes with the second finger. And this version in rhythm would be so now I'll play both versions, the first version followed by the second version, so you can hear that there is a very, very slight difference in the way the 2 fingerings sound. To my thinking, it's worth learning both, even if you stick with one over the other. Once you've mastered the ending phrase, let's move on to the last pattern to learn, which is going to be the pattern for the B section. Begin with this pattern by placing 4, 3, 2, 1 on A, C, D and E, as you would if you're playing the ending. So this time we're going to play 4, 3 and 2. Now, just before we play the thumb, we need to get the second finger back on the D. Then just before we play the second finger, the thumb goes back on. Same again to the end of the phrase. After the last D of the phrase, don't connect. It'll be a fresh placing for the next phrase. So if we carry on that line, we place 4, 3, 2, 1 on G, B, C and D. And here we're going to play 4, 3, 2 as before. Now this time we place the second finger onto B rather than C. And then we carry on exactly the same principle as the previous one. Once you're happy with the mechanics of those 2 phrases, let's get them into rhythm. So 4, 5, 6. Before looking too closely at sort of the possible left-hand patterns, let's look at the tune itself. What I hope you'll notice in the arrangement I've given is that there is only a left-hand bass chord or individual note, mostly just on the downbeat of the bar, except for the ending phrase. For me, I feel this is really too bare, but to start off with, it's a good starting point to be at. Then once you're familiar with the tune, start experimenting with some of the ideas that I've given you on the handout for the left hand. So to begin with, learn the basic arrangement and then start applying some of the patterns from the handout into the piece itself. Before we get too carried away, one other thing to point out before I play it. When I first learnt this tune, at the start of the B section, the first note in the version I first learned was A rather than the written G. there seems to be about a 50-50 split between whether one should play an A here or whether it should be a G. If you decide that you'd rather play the A than the written G, perfectly acceptable, but change the C bass notes in the first two bars of the B sections to A's, or an A and E if you want to play a two-note chord. But if you choose to stick to the G, I'd keep the harmony based around a C chord or C in the bass. So, for now, I'll just play the basic arrangement so you can hear how the piece goes, and you've got something to work towards in terms of the basic arrangement. So once you can play the basic arrangement, one of the things you can do is to start looking at varying your accompaniment and applying some of the other accompaniment patterns that are provided in the worksheet. To begin with, the first option is literally just the root note of the chord played with the second finger on big beat 1 and big beat 2, or if you're counting this in 6, beat 1 and beat 4. So to begin with, it's just going to be playing a pair of A's for the A bass note bars and G's for the G one. So it would be and how that would fit into the tune would be like this. The next thing you can have a go at doing is just doubling up the fifths. So again, playing fifths on the downbeat of the bar, on the big beat of the bar, and the second big beat. So beats 1 and 4 if you're counting this in eighth notes or quavers, and it would sound like this. Yet another option you can try is the one given on the second line to the handout, which is to play the open fifth on the big beat 1, followed by just the third of the chord on the second big beat of the bar, or beat 4 if you're counting this in 6. And this is how that would sound. Another option would be to place the 3 fingers and play the root of the chord on the downbeat, and then the third and the fifth of the chord on big beat 2 or beat 4. So on the exercise handout it would look like this. In the tune it would sound something like this. Another option would be to play a full 3-note triad, both on big beat 1 and big beat 2. This is how it would sound in the A section, or for example, or actually no, for a change I'll pick on the C section. Then the final pattern that I want to talk about and gave in the workshop. I use it in the basic arrangement for the last 2 bars of the piece, and if you find that too difficult to do, as I said, you can just play the bass notes to start off with. So the challenging thing with these 3 chords is just getting that E-B-E chord in and getting 4-2-1 to place cleanly. So like I said about the tune, spend some time learning that shape, getting 4-2 and 1 placed. The third finger just hangs loosely inside the hands. You don't want it to be sort of outside the hand, you just want it hanging in loosely, and you also don't want to try and draw it too far in to the palm of the hand while the fingers are placed. You're just trying to avoid unnecessary tension in the hand, because you just want everything to feel as relaxed as it can. So if need be, practice placing the shape, squeezing the strings slightly, play some notes, shake the hand out, and without looking at the strings, seeing if you can land the shape, because it's landing the shape that's important. For the ending, you want to play 1 and 3 on A and E, then 4-2-1 on E, B, E, back to A and E with 1 and 3. So just spend a little bit of time practicing that chord sequence out of context. Start mucking around with the tune, doing what you will with it. This is not an exhaustive list of various patterns, but I hope it is something that will get you started and to have some fun experimenting with how you can make your arrangement of this tune your own rather than mine. So I wish you all the best of luck with it, and until the next Quarren Tunes, thank you very much.